Being 18:30 hours, I call the committee of the whole to order. Clerk, call the roll, please.
President Weatherston.
Yes.
Trustee Stillman.
Here.
Trustee Martin. Trustee Lambert. Trustee Pierce. Trustee McManus. Trustee Wishaw.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the committee of the whole September 10th. Thank you, Nancy. Have a second, please. Sorry, was that Fran? Yeah. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2-minute opportunity for the public to address us. We cannot respond because it may conflict with open meeting requirements. Seeing nobody, we'll move on. New business request for discussion on market indicators from commercial development and based on residential rooftops. Laura, are you going to lead off on that? Thank you. Is that mic on?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. All right. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Laura Million, Deputy Director with RCEDC. On this particular topic, we've got two experts that we are joining us. Lee Jaramillo, who's the principal of North Terra, and he's a Caledonia resident and also led the development of the Starbucks and ONH on Douglas Avenue. The other individual is Russ Sagmon, who is a partner at Colliers out of the Milwaukee office. Russ and his team have worked across Southeast Wisconsin and have long connections in Racine County, including helping secure the Wingstop in Caledonia. So they'll be able to provide some context of the different things that developers look at or retailers look at when they're coming into an area. I've provided you some materials just to give you some perspective. Oftentimes, retailers are looking at the demographics around a certain area. On Douglas Avenue, your main retail is the Green Tree Center. It's considered a neighborhood center. So oftentimes they're looking at what the demographics look like in a 3-mile area. So what you have is a 1-mile, 3-mile, and 5-mile map. I've included some demographics. That doesn't mean that this is specifically what a specific retailer is looking at. These are just, options for things to look at. So you've got two different things. One sort of a market profile that gives you a picture or an easy, infographic to look at. And then there's a longer piece that has lots of other demographics. So we're going to start out, let Lee come up and talk a little bit, and then we'll have Russ. And then as you guys have questions, we can facilitate the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Lee Jaramillo. Do I need to do the whole address thing? You want to know where I live? 5226 Clover Lane here in Caledonia. Thanks for having me here. Yes, we are the developers of the Starbucks and ONH. By the way, doing really, really well. Yes, and we're trying to do even more along that corridor. It's important to note that most of my development experience has been in retail development, QSR, quick service restaurants. I don't want to step on Russ's toes on all the fancy terminology, but I do want to say that it's important to understand that with the residential component of this, of bringing something to an area, they kind of feed off each other. I don't know how much you wanted me to sort of get into that, but we are currently working on a multifamily opportunity here in Caledonia, and it's important to note that those two things feed off each other. It's really important. I'm not going to go into sort of the plan that we have, but when we're looking at areas such as Douglas Avenue, it's important to understand that we're looking not only at demographics, high-level stuff, but the Starbucks of the world are also looking at sort of the demographic traffic. And to be honest with you, I don't know if you remember me coming up here before, but they weren't too thrilled about the traffic on Douglas. It wasn't like sort of the 20,000 cars per day. It seems like it now because Starbucks is now here, but they're looking at other things. And I had to, as someone that's local here, had to sort of paint a picture of what Caledonia was really about. And so when they're looking at certain metrics, if you will, it's not just population, it's income, it's all kinds of different things, rooftops, it's all kinds of different things. And when we're looking at certain areas, we're looking at access, we're looking at, what's missing in the area, we're looking at sort of, the rooftops and who's living here, where's the money, right? And so I had to sort of convince Starbucks, for example, hey, don't just look at your high level demographic information. There's more to the story, especially in Caledonia. You guys know this very well. There's different pockets here in Caledonia. You've got what I call the money, this is kind of what I say, there's money over here and there's a bunch of rooftops coming up, up and down north and south of on the corridor of Douglas Avenue. And so they had to take all these different things, and also ultimately they had to take a chance, right? And see if a project like a Starbucks would work, and they're doing really well. They're really happy with the location. They're really happy with how it's operated. But when we look at areas to develop in, we're not only looking at what you guys have in front of you, right? These basic demographic information, right? We're looking at other things. We're kind of getting into sort of the neighborhoods and trying to understand who lives here. And we're trying to paint that picture. So as developers, especially someone that's from here, we can paint a better picture and get them to sort of understand what the needs are here. So we're working on a multifamily development. I know I don't really want to talk about it because it's all in concept right now, but we have 4 Mile and Green Bay Road under contract. I don't know if you guys know that property there. It's an 18-acre parcel. And a lot of it depends on sort of, who's moving here, what are the needs and what are the sort of the amenities that this area has. And so we always have to juggle, whether we're gonna, so should we build more multifamily or should we build more commercial? So what comes first? But I think they both have a symbiotic relationship to each other. And so when we're looking at sites like Caledonia, we have to look at the entire picture before we make a sort of a decision. And then you guys ultimately get to share in that decision as well. So I know I'm being really broad right now, but I hope to see you guys in the next couple of months to talk a little bit more about our project, but I'll leave the rest. Yes. And we're also hoping to work on some more commercial opportunities, and maybe we'll be working with Russ on those. So thank you.
Hello, Russ Sagmon, Colliers. I'm a partner on the retail group. I guess we'll start with the demographics. Lee, great job on the ONH and Starbucks development. I don't think anyone else would be able to convince them to come here. I've known Lee for over 20 years since I was an intern in this business, and so we've kind of grown up in the industry together. So Laura asked me, kind of what are the challenges? I work with retailers every day. I'm working with a retailer in Chicago. Actually, we're touring tomorrow. We're going to be looking at Racine. And they're in Kenosha already, and they're looking to keep pushing into Wisconsin. What do they look at when they look at a community like yours? They look at multiple facets, as Lee said. It's not one thing. It's rooftops for your community is probably the most important. Traffic count, which is we have to paint the picture. The traffic counts aren't 20,000. There's a lot of check marks that they check when they go through, and they say, okay, does it click these 10 boxes? If it doesn't click these 10 boxes, they'll say, well, we can go to a Sunbelt state and do a deal in Georgia where we know there's going to be population growth there, and it'll eventually catch up to our units. So they're a little more selective in states like Wisconsin because it's just a slower growth state, and not that that's a bad thing, but they will look at all these facets. So some of the good things you guys have, as Lee mentioned, you guys have a high household income here, which is good. They like to see disposable income. You guys do have the county itself has some population growth. You guys are a little bit landlocked, so you have to come up with creative sites to get some more rooftops in the area. The one thing I would say we're lacking here, which makes this more of a neighborhood type center, is the daytime population. So the employment centers tend to be out, kind of more Mount Pleasant, Sturtevant. That's where the employers are. It just makes sense because you have the lake on one side. It's hard for people to commute in. So you're a little bit more of a bedroom community, and that's how retailers look at that. So adding more rooftops is going to maintain and help bring the retailers here. I mean, I work on the bank out in front of the Kmart, and that's a question they always say. Well, when someone come here, the traffic counts are a little under 20,000, which it'll change. Douglas was under construction for a long time, and the DOT only does those counts every so often. So we sometimes have to do our own studies, which this can help and hurt. But lately, your cell phone tracks where you're going. So we use Placer AI and a couple other of these data. Basically, anytime you download an application on your phone, it knows when you're in Pick and Save. It knows how long you're there. It knows where you live. It knows where you went before and where you went after. And so we see all that data. So we know that you're spending an average of 14 minutes at Pick and Save. The average demographic is whatever. So the interesting one is always the Starbucks, because it's a lot of teenage girls. I go to it, it always shows it's their dad's phone. So I'm like, wait a second, so it's like this isn't the demographic that I'm seeing there. So it's like the cell phone is registered under their parent usually, but that's kind of a funny one. if you saw the map that Laura printed off, one thing that every municipality along Lake Michigan has a problem with is the demographics. As part of it is, fish don't buy products, so you have to we have to rely on the rooftops, and so and compounding that, you have an airport which cuts into part. So there's a couple things here. I guess it'd be similar to Cudahy would have the same problem. They've got I live in Whitefish Bay. We have the same problem with lake on one side with the highway on the other, and you can't so that's one thing that what we'll try to sell the site on them is look at the drive time. Okay, let's look at a 5-minute drive time rather than a radius, because the radius is really getting chopped off by the lake here. So the one thing you do have in your power is to grow the population and get more rooftops. And hopefully that's enough on that checkbox to convince them to come here. Starbucks probably wouldn't have been here unless Lee, Lee's been doing this for a long time, knows the Starbucks representative pretty well, and was able to convince him to come here. And obviously, Peter at ONH has some pull too, so he probably helped convince them to come here. But any specific questions on how we analyze, I'm happy to dive into. It does, because it's bringing that cell phone tracking data. We'll see, we'll have a map, it'll have hotspots, and it'll show where they're going. One thing that can help and hurt is that cell phone tracking data will jade their judgment a little bit sometimes. So it might say, okay, well, this, McDonald's that McDonald's actually does pretty well. It ranks like a B in the market, but they'll say this has this many visits per day, or this many visits at night. And you can look at the time of day they're going to. So that's a really interesting one. So that McDonald's tends to be busier mornings and nights, not as much at lunchtime, where the McDonald's, let's just say out on Highway 20, they've got a more sustainable. So the retailers, when they come to a market, she brought up Wingstop was an example. We helped put them there. They have a location on Highway 20, and the sales are substantially more there, just because you've got daytime population and the rooftops. And just a higher traffic count. So here, they're relying more on those rooftops and nights and weekends, because people tend to commute out to go to work and then come home and then live. So that's the challenge you kind of work with on being more of a bedroom community. Mhm. Yeah, we can track that. We can do it. I actually did it we did it on our call for Pick and Save, and I can show it. The example I like to use is, when I pulled up Target, when Laura and I were on a call to show the Targets, where are the people going to the Target that live here? So I guess if you want to raise your hands, who goes to the one by the mall and who goes to one in Oak Creek? And so that would be, based on those two, that's a perfect example. So that's a regional trade center where you're going to go, okay, I'm going to go over by the mall and go to that Target, or I'm going to go up to Oak Creek and go to the Drexel area. And so those are the regional trade areas. You have more of a neighborhood services, and those are the kind of the ones we're targeting. When they come to a market, they usually try to go to the regional area first. And if that does really, really well, like the Wingstop, they said, oh, we're doing really, really well here. We don't think we're going to cannibalize our sales there, and it's far enough away. One thing that we try to convince them is, if we put a drive time map, that's what it helped convince Wingstop to come here, because they were like, oh, we're going to cannibalize our sales. It takes 13 minutes or something, by zigzagging to get over to that Wingstop. So it's not very easy to get over to Highway 20. So why not have a unit here if the sales are really doing well? And I don't think their sales went down on Highway 20 when they opened this one. So that's a good example that we can point to. But at the same time, the sales are probably on 60% of what they are on Highway 20.
Which people are shopping out of the area?
Wingstop?
For example, I go to, I mean
just
anybody. For example, I tend to go shopping at Sendix just because I like it.
Yeah, and that is
I really
a huge.
would like Sendix to come here.
Yeah, that's a huge impact. So I work with a lot of financial institutions, and financial institutions in particular, they look at that a lot. So one example that we did for Associated Bank was in Lake Geneva. They had one in Delavan and one in Lake Geneva, and they can track, where the people are shopping. They knew that the people were coming to Lake Geneva on average, once a week, because they wanted to go to Walmart and all that stuff. And so they said, well, if we close the branch in Delavan, we know that most of the people are coming to Lake Geneva at least once a week, if not maybe twice a month. And so we feel like with that type of use. So one thing that retailers look at are the daily needs users. gyms, grocery stores, schools. So those drive a lot of those are kind of the anchors that they look at. But having those rooftops here that you live nearby is important. But that is a factor. If there's a certain retailer and they know that you're driving up to Oak Creek to go to Target, they're like, well, we have a unit by Target there. We have a unit in Mount Pleasant. Let's just say, do we really need one here? Because we know everyone that lives here goes to both of those areas this frequently. We don't really need one. Why would we spend the money to open up another store? So that can be a little bit of a challenge. But eventually, if you get enough traffic count and enough rooftops, they can't ignore it anymore. And so it is, a community like yours, population growth is kind of an important metric to keep retailers.
Only by the lake, but also by the quarry.
Mhm.
I mean, so we really are kind of,
Yeah, and that's I mean, you get that in other states too. It's really interesting when you start looking at let's just say like Tennessee or something where there's like mountains and things like that, where they have these weird like things. And so we get it here, and you're not, like I said, Cudahy is a great example. South Milwaukee, just they're kind of stuck between an airport and a lake, and so you guys are very similar in that manner, where it's a narrow strip of of population. So it can be a little bit challenging, but there's other things that, like I said, the anchors are very important in a neighborhood community, so that the pick and save, that they stay healthy, and Kroger keeps them open. Kroger is always in flux what they're doing. Nobody really knows, but that grocery store has really great sales, and so I'm not too concerned that a lot of retailers, they always look to see how's that grocery store doing, and because when you look at the grocery store and we map them out, no one from outside the area is going to that pick and save. It's all the people that live around it. And you're getting a few people that might come up from Racine that maybe are going away from the Piggly Wiggly or something and coming up here. But that would be, let's just say the Piggly Wiggly closes, which has been rumored back on and off. That would bring more traffic to the pick and save, which, so.
When you look, excuse me, when you look at us overall, looking as potentials, and I know it's out there, is that there's the whole discussion of the KRM coming through again, and that would put a station right here in Caledonia. Would that have a significant impact in the way you all look at what this community can develop as?
Yeah, it would. I mean, people definitely look at the transportation hubs and to see, and a lot of times we'll have to look and see like ridership. But a good example, the highest performing Chick-fil-A in the entire world, I guess you want to say, is in Chicago off the Red Line in the Loop, because that's where everyone gets on, they get off, and they go. So that is like so that's a good example. We are working with a developer who in Sturtevant, who's based on construction pricing and interest rates, I don't know, they're kind of challenging right now, but potentially working on a hotel deal in the Sturtevant Business Park near that because of the Amtrak station. So yes, that factors on how many people are coming and going, and that would be something more like I'm picking up something to grab as I'm going home from the transportation hub or something like that.
Down at Lake Forest and what it did for that community when that was developed. I guess the other thing is understanding, and I hear what you're saying, we're not particularly ever going to be a manufacturing facility area, but are we the kind of community that could look at bringing in other types of business that aren't doing manufacturing that would increase our business load or reason for people to live and work here?
Yeah, I mean, you see hubs. There's a reason why Aurora built their hospital out on the highway, because it's easier for people to get from the whole region. So you're still going to go there that you live here. I would say it'd be more small offshoot, like hub and spoke, like medical or something like that. Like Aurora might have their hospital out at the freeway, but then they might say, oh, you know what? To help people that maybe aren't driving or shouldn't be driving, we'll have a spoke system, and we'll have smaller units, and that's kind of how a lot of like banks used to operate. They'd say we'll have a large bank in downtown with our commercial lending division. We'll have a small branch in each of these, but that's a example that people don't really need. The cell phone is acting as your bank for a lot of things, and so we don't really need to go to the bank as much as we used to. So that example is a little bit antiquated.
As we provide, particularly when I think of our police and fire, does that get calculated in?
Not typically. I mean, we will look at they will look at shrinkage in which is theft in a retail location. There's a reason, they won't say that's why they closed, but you can look at, certain big box retailers that have closed all units in Chicago. And so that is something that people look at. It's not something that they usually say when they're looking, but it might be in their back of their mind. Did they feel comfortable in a certain neighborhood? I've been in the car with retailers and they're like, I don't feel comfortable having my staff in this area or something like that. They'll say things like that, but it's not, it comes down to the demographics too, so they're like, is it, are we looking at, Starbucks is, typically working, it might be working folks grabbing in the morning and then catching the high school kids or something after school or whatever it might be. And so demographics are usually brought up, not specifically like safety and crime.
Holly, did you have a question?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Fire, police station.
Holly?
Really quick question. You follow like the town hall pages and things like that and what people's realistic expectations are for like our Douglas Avenue corridor. Why don't we have a Target? Why don't we put in like a co-op in the Kmart building? Unrealistic expectations of what the cost of real estate is or what we can realistically expect a business to succeed.
Yeah.
I drive to Oak Creek. I don't drive down to Regency for Target, those types of things. What is is there any sort of goal or some type of business, bigger, larger business that we could maybe expect to see? Not necessarily a name. I don't need like a business name, but maybe a different type of specialty grocery store or a retailer, clothing retailer, something that maybe we're working on in the near future that we could look forward to? Is there any sort of goal in mind, or are we just kind of looking for more trendier fast food, or you know what I'm saying? Any sort of goal in mind? I'm not looking for any names. I'm not looking for just like what are we looking for in the next couple of years as we look down the road? I don't expect a Target. I don't expect a Sendix. Just
The way most retailers look at it is they know what their average unit volume is. So the AUV, they call it average unit volume. So they might say, we do $2 million in annual sales at all of our, 300 units across the Midwest or the country. And they'll say, of that, we can spend this percentage on labor, this percentage on cost of goods sold, and this percent on real estate. And let's just take QSR, which is a quick service restaurant, or people call it fast food, but we call it quick service restaurant. They'll say we need to be within 8% of sales, and so they say if we can be about approximately 8% of sales, then we can make it work. But the models factor in the population, the traffic counts, and so they model these things to say, okay, well, the population's a little bit light here and the traffic count is slightly lower. So like Starbucks probably modeled, they probably put a lot of pressure on Lee to say, hey, we can't quite pay the rent that we pay, in Oak Creek, but maybe we can pay, and so he has to sharpen the pencil and try and figure out and in some communities like that, you do see more, you have to get creative with, TIF and other incentives to try and get that delta, because it just doesn't pencil out. And then they're like, well, why are we going to do the deal here? Because we're not going to be that 8% of sales, and we're just not going to be profitable. And the challenge right now, everything is more expensive. The land is more expensive. The construction is more expensive. The interest is more expensive. And then the retailer has labor is more expensive, and the cost of goods sold and the food is more expensive. So the pie the profit part gets getting smaller and smaller. And so they're a lot more picky now than they might have been, 15 years ago, where they would just blanketly, hey, we're going to put a dot everywhere and try and get them open, see how they do. 10% of them might not do well. 10% of them are going to be great. And then after, 10 years and the lease is up, then we'll just close those bottom 10%. But now they're very, very picky on where they go.
I think as a board, we just want to encourage this type of, we're not expecting these big retailers, but we want to start as a board encouraging these types of businesses.
And I think
along the corridor.
One thing that's weird about Wisconsinites
you know.
is we're very loyal to our local, Milliger / Quick Trip, O&H. We're very loyal to our own brands. And so when a new retailer comes to town, a lot of times when they enter Wisconsin, the sales at the beginning aren't like Chick-fil-A was a good example. Their first few stores in Wisconsin were not performing like they were in other, but Culver's, obviously they can go anywhere and they're gonna print money. So just because we're a very loyal consumer. But once they're in and we start adapting to them, we become loyal to it's like we're very habitual in Wisconsin on what, what retailers are here. So it is a little more challenging when you come to a market like Wisconsin because we're very loyal to our local group. So I guess all I can say is that encourage people to do your grocery shopping at this Pick and Save, because the more people that they see that, hey, the sales at this Pick and Save are, try to harbor people to stay in town and do their shopping, and that will, try to get more people. That's all I can say. Whether or not you're going to get a discount box retailer, like a Target or something, yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
mind driving Oak Creek,
everybody
but
always says,
I
I want Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
And I said, how many Trader Joe's have been in these? It's
Yeah.
like, that's always the one that people always bring up. And so and a lot of these retailers only have so much capital and so much resources to open stores. So they're very selective on where they're opening stores. But
Let's ask Holly's question the other way around. What can we do to make ourselves prettier besides rooftops? I think we need rooftops, but what else should we be working on?
I mean, you guys are already pretty good at it, but making it easy. I mean, you guys, for planning and zoning and just making a very seamless process and very transparent, which you guys are pretty good at already. So I wouldn't say there's certain municipalities that, I don't want to name names because but like, it's like, yeah, they make it very challenging, and they're like, see those shrubs on there? Like, let's come back next month and talk. Can't we just talk about now and like get on with the project? So streamlining the process just as much as possible, and kind of being, like Oak Creek was a great example. Like Doug and Carrie in the planning department there did a great job. If you go back 20 years ago, they kind of like, were just very aggressive on attracting retailers. I mean, they have a complete different demographic, and they're on the highway, so they have a lot of other things in Oak Creek that you guys just don't have as your small community, a village, not a city. So, but they made it very simple, very transparent. You could pick up the phone; they'll tell you what their thoughts were. They'd tell you what staff recommendations are ahead of time, and you wouldn't get blindsided. And so that was one thing that they did right, and that's why Oak Creek saw the success that they did. So that's the one thing that is in your control. The other stuff, is not always in your control, really. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Mr. Wishaw?
Just one comment on, Holly brought up, sort of praying about potential upscale grocery stores. I worked for Roundy's, obviously, for 13 years, and then Kroger. And while I was there, we opened up about 50 Mariano stores in Chicago area. And I don't know if you've ever been to any of those, but they're very upscale. You can go and find a 1 pound piece of cheese and pay $200 for it, right? So when they looked at this area, I can tell you Caledonia was not considered for an upscale store because we're considered too blue collar. We're not going to pay that much for a hunk of cheese. Chicago suburbs, Hoffman Estates, there's a lot of money down there, and their expectations are totally different than what we have here. And the other thing I was going to say is there's a number of Illinois people that have moved up into Kenosha to get out of the Illinois issues. And the expectations of those people were of a type of Mariano store, which is why we opened up something similar to that on 31 and 11. That's not all the way to a Mariano store, but it's certainly more upscale than what we have here. And you can go there and pay too much for a hunk of cheese too. But our profile here does not fit, at least when I was there, does not fit what that type of store would require. So I don't know how we make ourselves more pretty other than
Tom?
be less blue collar.
Nancy?
So to follow with what he said about being more pretty, one of the challenges when you look at this, I was up in Wausau again just recently. So, I mean, the size of the two communities is not that terribly far off, but they have a downtown. We don't. We don't have any Main Street draw, visual, anything. We can say, look at the lake, but that's pretty limited there. Is there anything from you all's perspective looking at us that you would say, could you think about doing something either in your infrastructure or something along Douglas Avenue or somewhere that would begin to create that image, basically, besides the fact that we have an empty Kmart, and that's what we're known for?
Yeah, and that was the example of Oak Creek was a great example. They had this Delco plant that they tore down to put the Woodmans, and they kind of created a downtown. They were, Oak Creek and Franklin are both kind of just sprawl, and they didn't really have an identity of where their downtown was. Oak Creek change that, and they were really proactive on making sure that, Howell and Drexel were going to be there downtown. And then, they put the city hall as part of Drexel Square. They had the hospital there, so they kind of worked with a bunch of stakeholders to make that happen. Where Franklin, no one can really define where downtown Franklin is. So like when I get retailers that call me all the time, they say, well, Franklin, it's growing pretty rapidly and it has really high income. We want to be in Franklin. I don't have a good answer where to tell them where to go. There's multiple little pockets, the Rock, and there's the Target, and there's all these little areas, but there's not a good defined area. Oak Creek, it's very simple. Like, you want to be in Drexel or Howell? It's like, so they've done a pretty good job of making people aware. I mean, obviously Douglas is your corridor, so that's not going to change just because of the way your topography, you're landlocked. So I don't know how much you're going to want to do. A lot of municipalities will try to do mixed use developments. That's challenging sometimes for the retail on the first floor. The retailers don't typically like that from a loading standpoint and parking and stuff like that. So I wouldn't, say push, if you're going to do more multifamily, which is definitely needed, because I mean, if you looked at a price to build a home nowadays, it's just not obtainable. And you look at what your median household income is, it's like the old rule of like 2.5 or 3 times. It's pretty challenging to build a house for that number. You just can't. So to get people in the community and locked in, and then as they grow in their careers and are able to afford a home, that's the multifamily is the route that most municipalities seem to be taking.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Make yourself disposable to us, okay?
Address?
I'm kidding. Totally kidding.
She knows where I live. So you can
She'll be stalking you next.
I can just look it up.
So we're gonna move on to RCEDC's mid-year report. Is that
Yeah,
what we're?
that's what I will be doing. So want to provide an overview of RCDC's activities under our contract with the village and across Racine County. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Tony. Just as a reminder, sort of our focus is on facilitating projects that increase tax base and in result in job opportunities for our residents. So there are 4 areas that we focus on in our strategic plan: business attraction, bringing new businesses and development into the community; business expansion, and we've added entrepreneurship. So really connecting with our existing businesses and making sure they've got, understand the resources available to them, and facilitating financial assistance. We've got talent attraction, which is really focused on our greaterracinecounty.com website and showcasing Racine County as a great place to live and work. And then finally, just fostering partnerships and exploring new opportunities. So continuing to evolve our program offerings and making sure that we're supporting our communities. In terms of when to call RCEDC, really to access loans and grants and incentives, as a company is expanding, we ask them to call us early to make sure that we can sort of connect them with the right resources. Finding a site in Racine County, we help navigate through the project approval process, connections to entrepreneurial partners. We have a lot of resources on our website, tools to promote the county for talent attraction, as well as data. So the piece I gave you tonight is just a piece of what we have available, but if there's something else that you're looking for, you can always call us and we can figure out if we can get access to it. So mid-year outcomes, you all know that we focus on our metrics pretty heavily. We've assisted 30 businesses for the first half of the year, so this is through the end of June. We're in process of updating this right now to include Q3. So we're at mid-year, we're about 43%, and as we sort of talk through this, you'll see that just generally things are slower in terms of activities and projects. So successful projects are taking place across the community, with one in Caledonia, which we'll talk a little bit, which is the Saputo project, but also, and this does not include the Ashley project, which will get included in Q3. In terms of business recruitment trends, industrial vacancy rates have gone up in the county. And in general, we actually were with a group of real estate developers, which were at IMET today. We had a real estate showcase, and they indicated that things are generally slow, but they're really hoping that Q2 of 25 is when things will start picking up. So Tony, you can roll forward a few slides if you'd like. Go one more. Yep. We are seeing absorption in smaller industrial spaces, so let's call it less than 50,000 square feet. That's what's sort of been absorbed in the Likewise building in Caledonia, as well as some spaces in Mount Pleasant. just generally slower deal flow. What we're doing in regards to that is really increasing our coordination with WEDC and Milwaukee 7, which is the Regional Economic Development Organization, in terms of outreach to our site selectors. So Saputo Cheese, really this project came forward because of our relationship with Zilber and Caledonia's investment there. And we were able to fully move that project forward because of assistance from Racine County. So there was a forgivable loan that was provided to that project. So excited to see that project continue to move forward. And my understanding is steel is going in for that building. You move to the next slide. On the business expansion side, we do a lot of outreach to businesses just to make sure that they know what resources that we have available, and also just keep that dialogue open to understand what their needs are, what they're experiencing. Generally, I'm finding with manufacturers, it really sort of depends on which industry they're in. Some are doing well, some are slowing down. A lot of them are just being very cautious about hiring. We've done 28 loans and grants. You can see that the total of the 3.1 million loans and grants is just a lot lower. People are buying things that are less expensive. They're not willing to make large investments right now. So one of the things that we are seeing, you can go forward 2 slides, is, we are seeing some businesses that are seeing some cash flow crunches. And one of the options that we have at our CDC, because we're an SBA 504 lender, which allows us to go outside of Racine County and also do larger loans, we can do some refinancing. So we've got local loan funds, but we also go SBA 504. So that just provides a little bit of information there. On the talent side, we've worked with WEDC. We finished our digital ad campaign for the year and are currently looking at opportunities to continue that program in 25. But we received a grant from WEDC, which we're hoping to pursue. And we really felt that the campaign performed pretty well in just making sure that people are aware of Racine County as a place to live and work, and really targeting individuals in Northern Illinois. And then lastly, working with WEDC, they've launched a national campaign. So Caledonia, Saputo Cheese, South Hills Commerce Park is where we've been spending a lot of time in Caledonia. We've had 12 assists, so those incoming inquiries for data, resources, we track where those come from, as well as just prospects. And as I was looking at that today a little bit more closely, Caledonia and Mount Pleasant are the hot spots of where we're really, looking at opportunities for industrial development for those prospects that are coming in. So things to watch, the Microsoft project, you can move forward one, Tony. That's the big project. It will have a significant impact on the entire county. Continue to have conversations with Microsoft. Their first data center will be operational in 26. There are lots of construction workers. There's a lot of opportunity for electrical contractors, steam fitters and pipe fitters as well. So just a big impact there, as well as they're making investments in the community, United Way and others. The next one is really the BizStarts program. I've just touched on the entrepreneurship stuff. We've really sort of launched into this. It took us a while to get started. We identified this program out of Milwaukee, and we initiated it's a 3-phase program, 6 weeks of training. We're about midway through. They have their 4th class Thursday night. We've got actually 12 participants and a couple that are Caledonia residents, which is cool. We'll have mentoring that comes around them for 6 months, and then we have consulting support that will come from college students out of Carthage. So excited about this program. Housing market, it's, Russ sort of pointed to it, cost of housing has increased. Racine County, lowest amount of available housing inventory. Can roll forward, Tony, to the next one. RCDC with Racine County did a study in 2019. That's the new study, updated study with support of Racine County and the South Shore Realtors, Wisconsin Realtors Association will be released on October 10th, or at least we're having an event around that. So looking forward to seeing what the results find there. So, that's what's going on at our CEDC. We certainly just encourage you to connect business owners and entrepreneurs with us to make sure that they know what resources are available to assist them with their business.
Any questions, Laura? Nancy?
Previously, you had said that the heavy focus on RCEDC was along the I-94 corridor and heavy on the warehousing. And again, we're aware, even Ashley Capital is having trouble filling the facility they already have in Mount Pleasant. So is that still a primary focus for RCEDC is along that 94 corridor?
I mean, it still continues to be a focus. I mean, but you have to realize that not all of our staff is focused there. I mean, we've got, myself and one of my colleagues, that's where we focus. But we're also engaging with small businesses and talking to banks and things to help them, be able to get deals done as well. So it really just depends on what the product is that can assist them. And right now, I would say that I'm actually more involved in entrepreneurial stuff than, so we're just very, you've got to be flexible. We're almost like a small business in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you for being here tonight. Okay, item C, development update on 5141 Douglas Kmart. Pete?
I can provide a little bit of an update to the Kmart building. If you travel around the building, on the north side, we've been having a semi-tractor parking issue. I believe we got that under control. We have some signs now that are posted there that the police department is comfortable enforcing. And I could say probably for the past week now, I have not seen any semi-tractors parking overnight, or as I'm driving home from a night meeting, no tractor trailers are there. So feels like a small victory in that part. The parking lot's pretty chewed up already because of that parking. Second update I'll give you on it is I did have the real estate broker who is responsible for marketing that site call me and ask me if I had any development group reach out to me asking about potential tenants over there. And I explained, no, I did not hear anything. And he's like, okay, there's this particular development group who wants to get the land under contract and that they have one tenant in mind that would take up half of the space. The broker was calling me, asking me, did I hear from this group and who the tenant was? And I was thinking he was coming, calling me to tell me there was a tenant going to come in place. So we don't have any specifics, but there's an interested group that's looking to purchase the property. And so hopefully by the end of the year, I may have an update as to more specifics as to who this development group is and what kind of businesses they are typically associated with in landing tenants for commercial retail space. So fingers crossed that maybe sometime in 2025, we may at least have half of the building occupied.
Brad, did you want to? Brad, did you want to be recognized?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Is the litigation involving that building resolved?
I do not know the status of the litigation for the property maintenance issue. My guess that is being sorted out. Maybe that's the reason why I don't have any more information than was provided to me, because that may be a concern. But the broker didn't tell me that was a reason for hold up for any sort of future agreement. He was a little disappointed that this group said that they were in consistent talks with the village about how they could develop and occupy it, and
they aren't.
And I said they did not talk to me about it, and I didn't think they spoke to anyone else. So there's a little bit of limbo as to what the genuine offer is on the table, if there really is one or not. So hopefully by the end of the year, I can provide you a little bit more information as to how it's progressing, if anything is progressing, or if they did walk away due to litigation. Maybe I'll have that answer for you later this year. Cash is king, so if they can come with a cash offer, doesn't matter what
Money talks.
litigation.
Money talks. Thank you, Pete. Okay, moving on to code enforcement update on 6121 Highway 31.
Yes, the property owner, Kimball Point, was in court with the judge this week, and she asked for a payment plan, which the judge granted. So she has a payment plan of $100 a month for the next 6 months, and they're going to revisit her $3,000 in fines that she is on the hook for. She did explain to the judge that she intends on selling the property. I can back that up. I had 2 realtors last week contact me asking me for the backstory as to what the property is. And so after a lengthy conversation, I still don't see a for sale sign up on the property, so I don't know if I scared the realtors or not, but I did explain the 5-year history we've had with this property and the conditions of it. So it sounds like Kimmel Point is looking to sell the property. We'll see what goes there. We have court mandated mediation meeting, either scheduled for October 22nd or 23rd. The court, this is in relation to the circuit court case for us getting authority to raise the home and clean up the property, grade it, and restore it back to its original condition. So after the October meeting, we'll meet the first week in November. We'll actually go to court the first week in November, I believe. I can't remember the exact date, but that's the process that we're going to go there. Hopefully, it will, we'll get the authority from the circuit court. Hopefully, the applicant won't appeal, and we can start moving sometime in early 25 to take care of it. We do have money in our budget for property maintenance that we've kept every year, so we should be able to use that as a resource to clean up the property, hopefully in 2025, and we can have Ms. LaPointe sell the land and we can move on.
You got to paint a fluffier picture to these realtors.
Yeah.
I wanted to, but because some of the realtors are like, oh, I have guys that can take those vehicles, and I'm like, yeah, well, you know the son, and if you take any property of his, you're going to be in
I have a
bad
question for
situation.
Elaine on this subject. Elaine, it's obvious that our local judge is being awful soft on the resolution here. Is there nothing we can do to?
So you've got two different tracks going on. One, you have a continuing municipal court enforcement actions where there were citations that were issued, and she's been received multiple citations over the years and been convicted on multiple citations and has paid chunks of money already to the municipality for those fines. So this is a new set of citations and fines that she's gotten a payment plan on. So that's separate than the circuit court action, and the circuit court action is the one that's going to mediation and then has a trial date for November 26th. That's a court trial on the request of the village to raise the structure, a couple structures on the property.
Which court? Our court or back here?
Racine County Circuit
Racine
Court.
County.
So that one's a circuit court action, separate from the citations. What I think Pete was reporting on initially was that there were a group of citations that had been resolved by her pleading to them and the court imposing fines and then giving her time to pay. But she does owe $3,000 on those fines. So we could, if the village was so inclined, cite her again for noncompliance, and then those would work their way through the municipal court system separate from the circuit court action that's going to trial if it's not resolved by mediation.
So, wait a minute, back up, because I sat through one of these hearings with her, and she was ordered to do a cleanup. She didn't do it, and her excuse was her son was incarcerated. He wasn't the one assigned the task, it was her. But she didn't do it, and he just let it go, like it's okay. So I don't understand why we keep having our own municipal judge stretch this out.
Well, the municipal judge only has so much authority. The municipal judge has authority to act on the citations that are in front of them, either because they've been resolved via plea agreement by the parties, but the municipal judge has limited authority. They can't actually order her to go clean it up. They can just help. From a leverage standpoint, the citations are open, and if the municipality is so inclined to give her a deal on the tickets, if she cleaned up the property, that's how that process works. That judge can't order, but that's why we filed the circuit court action to get the circuit court judge to ask them to order her to either raise it or give us the authority to go on and raise and specially charge the property for those expenses. So that's what's pending, and we have the court trial at the end of November. If mediation fails, which we have to go to court-ordered mediation, but from the village's standpoint, our position is clean up the property and then we'll resolve the case with you. But if they're not willing to clean up the property in compliance with the village's code, there's not not very far you're going to get on the mediation standpoint.
Nancy?
Question, Pete. When I drove past there the other day, there's like new French doors and new Tyvek around the building.
Yes, her
So-
son installed the windows and the doors and all that without any permits.
Oh, good.
But, it looks better, right? But unfortunately, if you look on the north side of the building,
It's bad.
It's still bad, and it's just putting a little.
Lipstick?
You got it on the building, and he's done it. He's done the work without approval by the village.
Yeah, I know it. Fran, you got the wrong mic, but I'll turn it on for you.
Oh,
There you go.
Right.
That's all right.
okay. Is that, thank you, is that a stacked trial? I mean, is it certain to go in November? Sometimes trials get stacked, they'll have 3
No.
trials. I'm just wondering how realistic November is.
I don't know what else is on the trials calendar, but I'm just going off of my conversation with Todd Terry, and it has been set for a while. In this case, it's getting old from that perspective. Well, I guess it was filed at the beginning of February, but it's set for trial. I think it's set for a one-day trial on the court's calendar at 8:30 in the morning. I mean, it's possible there's other things scheduled. We know how that goes. So,
We might or might not get a resolution in November.
yeah. My hope is they filed their witness disclosures. The village was required to do that, and then the defendant filed theirs as well. So, I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Pete. Moving on. E, discussion naming rights for public park at Glen at the Water's Edge subdivision. Who is opening up this?
I can open and then pass to
You're gonna pass
others.
the baton to Holly?
Yeah, so at the most recent Parks Advisory Committee, we have discussed the 3.3 acre outlot that was acquired as part of the Glen at Water's Edge subdivision. 2/3, if not 3/4 of this park is considered wetland and ravine and steep slopes. And as part of the development, it was essentially called a passive park. It was a 6-foot wide walking path was built through the backside of this park, very small sliver of it, and was eventually to connect to the condominium development. The goal was to find a name for this, but as part of the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, there was further discussion that came down to naming rights, donations, possible recognition of fallen heroes, things like that. And we essentially, I'll turn it over to Holly and Mike, and essentially wanted to kind of bring it to everybody's attention and maybe get some direction on where this would like to go.
No, I didn't like the idea of Holly's Park. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually Mike's idea. I give him the credit. We thought about, because we've talked about raising money, parks, donations, things like that, of potentially offering it out to the public, businesses, of naming rights of the park. That's not a huge opportunity nowadays. There's not much land that could be public land that would have the opportunity for naming rights, especially for a large business or named in honor of someone. And it would be an opportunity for a substantial amount of money to be dedicated to something for the park. Now, it wouldn't, whatever the money would come from would not go in that park. It would just be the name to that park, and then that amount of money would actually probably go for something in Crawford Park, most likely, whether it's playground equipment or some sort of court sport or something that we wanted as part of our master plan. So we had figured we'd bring it to the board, see kind of what everybody's thought was on that, if that was an idea of a way to bring in some extra cash flow to our parks budget to pay for something within the park. We were thinking a substantial amount of money, $150,000, $200,000, if that was something that was palatable by everybody. And then potentially put it out to the public. Ryan and I had talked that we would come up with some sort of way to advertise it. I know our local media is in here. If we could maybe team up that way somehow, do an article or put it out there on social media. If anyone's interested, we may get interest, we may not get any interest. In which case we could always rely on some sort of, local name or something. But it was a way to help pay for something for our community. It's kind of what we thought.
Thank you, Holly. Anybody have any comments? Mike, did you want to add?
Brought up that it's an opportunity that we don't burden the taxpayer. It's a kind of a creative way to bring extra income for projects.
And I would assume that any funds raised would be earmarked directly for that park, nothing
Correct.
else.
Well, not the park that it would be named for.
The other,
The name, so the park that Ryan is talking about would be the one that we're naming. But the money that would come in for that name would actually go for something for a different park, because there's really nothing to put into that park. It's more of a walking,
Oh, okay.
it's more of a pass-through park. So we would earmark the money for something specific, though. It wouldn't just go into the general account, so to say.
And the donor would know that coming up.
Yes, that would be
All right.
known.
Fran, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm wondering where the number of 150 or 200,000, do we have any sense of what people are willing to pay for naming rights? Or is it just pulled out of the air or what?
It was a starting point, I guess, was the number.
Nancy?
I mean, have you got my button now? Okay. I mean, we've already done Crawford Park has a named name. I think the two challenges I see here, I mean, the concept is an okay concept, but this isn't a park that's going to pull a lot of public attention, especially if it's ravine and wetland. So when I look at that, and then you say somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000, that's a no-go. I mean, if I'm a corporation or a business, I don't see putting my name and putting that amount of money in for a park that people aren't even going to use. They're not going to see my name, because if you're going to put your name on it, you want marketing value back out of it. So like if you put naming rights to Green Tree Mall up here, our little shopping mall, that gets a lot of traffic. This isn't going to get a lot of traffic. Do it maybe with a lower volume expectation. I also think there's a challenge if you say to them, we'll name it after you and we want you to pay this money, but we're not going to use any of that money in that park because it doesn't have a need for it. Those are just my thoughts.
Well, I think and that's why we brought it for discussion. I would disagree with the fact that they would expect a high volume for that amount of money, because I have some experience in fundraising that amount of money. But I think also too, what we would do is it would get earmarked. The reason it wouldn't go into that park is because there's nothing to put into that park, right? But it would also, the money would go, like, let's just, for example, instance here, let's say we say, I'm just using numbers. Let's just say, okay, the cost to sponsor the name for this new park is $150,000. And we're gonna put $150,000 worth of brand new playground equipment in Crawford Park. We would put the advertisement in Crawford Park as well to say, this new playground equipment was financed by this donation from this business. So this is just a way to generate some new funding for an opportunity that does not happen very often. There's not an opportunity very often for a business or an entity or a person to have a public thoroughfare park named after them or their business.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a cost to the village to go ahead and try to institute this?
No. Not at all.
I will just add that the ultimate goal of naming this park is that in tandem, we are working and completing the park and open space plan. The expectation is that that is to be completed by January 1, 25, beginning of the year. At this time, it is essentially Outlot 4 Park, which doesn't have a great ring to it, but is something that, ideally there would be a goal to have in mind as well. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Okay, so, but if there's, I'm sorry, Fran, hold on one second. Let me complete my thought. If there's no cost to us, all you're really asking us tonight is just blessing to move ahead, right? Is that
So
what you're
just,
doing?
yeah,
I would guess the Parks Advisory Committee is looking for direction from the committee and or the board in this case to proceed with either donations for naming rights,
Request a donation, okay.
so that they can at least have a direction to continue moving forward with that in mind.
Thank you for waiting, Fran, go ahead.
I recognize that it's a park and it belongs to the village, but it's right in the middle of a residential development. And I would think that the developer might like to have some input into it. I mean, the developer might find it awkward to have a high-end development and then a park called, Pick and Save Park or whatever else it might be. So it seems to me that
I guess staff can always reach out to the developer to see if they had anything in mind, but I know they were pretty quick to get the lots that they did own into the hands of the builder. So now all of those lots are owned by Viridian Homes, who is currently developing each one of those lots. So it's something that staff can reach out to that developer if
But the
I
developer
just think
doesn't
it might
play
have
in
something to do with marketing the homes,
Yeah.
depending on what.
So I think it'd be prudent for us now to just say, for the Parks Committee to keep reviewing it and advise us again. Would you agree?
I'd say talk to the developer.
I'm sorry, you have a different opinion, Nance?
Yeah, I don't think it's a particularly good idea. I mean, I agree with the general concept, but again, it's a non-usable park next to a high-end development. So you're asking, basically, you're
What?
saying people come to this park
What?
that's been named for some
Well, that's why.
am I talking?
Yes,
Well, no, they're talking. Let me know when they finish talking.
they're done.
You're next to a high-end development. You're in a park that is not truly usable. It's not near major thoroughfare or anything. You're asking a substantial sum of money. You're not going to use any of the money in that park. I mean, I understand that part. And just to say, let's just throw it out there and see what the wind gets. If you're looking for $150,000, that's putting a mark on us as a village too, of what it is we're out there looking for. Crawford Park, if you put $500,000 for naming on Crawford Park, there'd be a lot more value behind it for the other same reason. So for me, I personally, sitting in my seat, I would not be in favor of it as it stands right now, but I'm only one of 7.
So how about if I suggest we leave it as an open issue and have Ryan go back to the developer and get his opinions?
But going back, but as Ryan just said, the developer, it's not really a developer issue. It sounds like it's more of the builder.
I work at the behest of the village board here, so
You do? Are you sure?
we brought this item ultimately to get direction from the board because
Right.
we have those options, right? We have a park that does not have much use left to it other than walking, that we can ask for money to get naming rights to, or we can defer it to local naming rights with a local hero, firefighter, soldier, whatever that might be. Or like you just mentioned, if you direct me to go reach out to the developer for their thoughts, we can definitely do that and come back to the next Parks Committee with more information.
Mr. Wishaw, you had a thought?
Well, trying to absorb all of this, but I agree with, first of all, I think it's a great idea. I think it's worth a try. Based on my experience with fundraising, though, I think it's going to be a tough sell to get much money for that site. But there are some ways around that issue. We can't rename Crawford, obviously, but we could do something like I've seen other parks do, and that is to either rename the road going in or something like that, or have a structure like an amphitheater sponsored by Tom Weatherston, whatever you want to call that.
Sponsoring what?
There are ways to get around that. This location would be a much better sell for most promotion ideas from, just based on my experience of doing it. And if you look at Pritchard Park, when the Johnson family donated roughly about $7 million for the aquatic center, they couldn't rename the park, but they've got the SCJ Aquatic Center splashed all over that place and on the website. So if you can get somebody to name something like that here with a amphitheater or whatever you want to, outdoor ice arena,
Yeah, the
I
pickleball
think you have a
course.
lot better chance of getting money than you would.
Well, we
at
weren't
that
just going to
location.
limit it to, and I think we were going to use that. This was just another opportunity for naming rights that doesn't come up very often.
I agree, but it's
we
kind of a
didn't-
remote location over there. I don't.
So, but
If
then
you
that,
if concentrate on this location for something, you'd have a lot better chance, I think.
Well, then that brought up the other opportunity, though. This is an opportunity then for the village to potentially come up with a name that we would prefer to name something that means something to our village. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe not necessarily the developer, but something that means something to the village, whether that's sentimental to us, you know what I'm saying? Like something that
Sure.
would mean something to us, not necessarily the developer. So that was the other concern, was we have the opportunity to do that as well.
Mr. Schmidt?
So,
I think what Lee just described is what we intend to do with Crawford Park,
Yes.
as we've discussed budget items for park expansion and additional amenities in the park. I think ultimately our goal is still to get funding through grants here at Crawford, as well as through donations, whether it's Wishaw Pickleball Court number 7, or
Wishaw Hockey Arena.
there you go.
we have a
Forget
space for
pickleball
that.
stuff. Why does that keep coming up?
But I just want to say that, yes, I believe that is something we're ultimately looking at. I'll just want to say that really, like I said, this came up in the Parks Advisory Committee. We're just looking for a little more direction on, should we be going out looking for donations for naming rights? Or should we just simply come back and say, this park does not have any future expansion to it. Let's find the name of somebody that we like or the village is liking to move forward with, and then we'll focus all of our donation efforts on Crawford's and the other parks.
This is what I was getting at, Ryan. Who's gonna do the marketing?
So Ryan, we'll come back to the board with a name. We'll come up with a couple ideas and we'll come back to you guys next month. How's that?
So the way I understand it is we'll bring this back to the Parks Advisory Committee and revisit this and bring it back to the board if
You
needed.
got it.
All
Thank
right.
you for the direction.
All right.
You could make it, the public might have all kinds of good ideas about who they'd like to name a park for.
Well,
You know, if we're naming it for a local hero or somebody.
Uh,
Throw it out on social media.
oh,
Nancy?
The zoo did
We was
something.
beating this to death, but go ahead.
No, I'm not going to beat it. I'm going to just say, to follow on bringing the value down, the zoo did do a thing with the naming of, I've forgotten, it was a new cub, it was something that was born at the zoo, and I've seen that in other places where they did throw it out as naming rights, but it was a bid process, and people kept bidding up and bidding up and bidding up. Now, it didn't bring in that kind of money, but it brought in reasonable amounts, and it created a lot of community interest, which is a little lesser level, but it might get you a little more interest, just a different marketing mode. No pickleball courts involved.
Mr. Wagner?
Hey, just to add on as another option I've seen in other communities is that they use the local schools and did a survey and asked the kids what would be a cool name for a park, and then have it go onto our social media, and then the residents pick from a list generated from the local school, and that's a way to get the public involved as well. Unfortunately, that won't generate any funds necessarily like your zoo idea, but you would engage your residents and have some potentially community buy-in in the naming of a small park that won't have much of any amenities in it.
All right, I think we've beat this to death. We're gonna put it under 5G and bring it back. 5F, discussion of possible action on planning and zoning administrator pay scale. Holly?
Huh?
My,
Now what do I need?
we're on the
Do I
planning,
need to fundraise for this?
planner, and yeah, planner and zoning administrator pay scale.
So, you want me to make the motion on this
Well,
earlier?
let me ask this, Chief, we talked about doing this on other people next month. Would it
So
be
should I make
prudent-
the motion to do it as we discussed?
Would it be prudent to put them all together?
This is a separate item that has its own separate
Okay.
theory, and I think it sort of requires its own separate conversation.
So discussion and possible action on planning and zoning administrator pay scale.
And I'm like, that's me. When we were able to, when we first posted the planner position, we weren't quite sure what number of applicants we would get. And we got 2, if I recall correctly, and that's all we had at that pay scale. And we lucked out and offered Todd the position. He accepted it. And one of the things that made him leave was his opportunity to make more pay. And when looking at the other planner positions that are in southeast Wisconsin, the base salary or the salary range is much higher than what we were offering. And right now, it has been very difficult for attracting the fill planner positions. And so there was a request to increase the pay scale for it to hopefully attract a planner that has some experience and not someone right out of college. And so the request is to modify the salary and increase it to attract a better pool of candidates for the position.
And just to be clear, I believe, so this one isn't specifically adjusting the range, but this is actually moving a classification.
Correct, that is a up to classification,
So it would move
Groups.
from
12 to 14.
12 to 14. So that's different than what we were talking about,
Okay.
expanding the ranges
So we're moving it from what level to what?
from a 12 to a 14.
12 to a 14? Fran, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. Because isn't what he was doing in large part code enforcement, not planning? And are we looking for a code enforcer? Because if we are, I don't think we should bumping him up 2 pay grades.
No, as if it is a split position of enforcement of the zoning. It wasn't just in code enforcement as, doing property maintenance, but also the administration of the zoning code when it comes to development and building. And Todd was progressing into a position where he was going to be taking on more of the plan commission reviews. He was in the process of learning some of the certified survey map and subdivision plat review that engineering takes the lead on. And so this next planner will be doing more planning work than Todd has done. Todd has only been here 11 months. And so his first focus was on permit administration of the zoning code as to permits, as well in code enforcement. And eventually he was progressing into becoming more of a contributor to reviewing of plan reviews. If you attended plan commission meetings, Todd has was beginning to present more and more items and reports and doing more planning work. And that would be my focus in the future. Ideally, I think it would be great if we had a part-time code enforcement person that was dedicated just to that. There's enough, I believe we could justify enough work for that, but at this point, looking for the planner zoning administrator. So it's going to be a 50-50 split moving forward with planning and code enforcement and administrating the zoning code when it comes to permit reviews and development.
Tom?
Yes.
Because we do have similar items on the next agenda, I'm going to suggest that we move this to be considered along with the other ones that we talked about that we're putting on the next.
Well, that's
On the
why I
next
asked that to
agenda.
begin with, Fran, but what the chief implies that this is changing the grades so they can go start headhunting.
So it's your choice to do whatever you like, but I believe that they're separate. The other one was to adjust the ranges and to adjust executive compensation. This is a change of classification that would then require a different process. So that is going to be dealt with through just the general budget process. This would require you to actually want to make a change.
But it's going to affect our budget as well. I mean, it's a,
Well, yeah, of course, all those things affect the budget.
Have you posted? This would be for posting it currently for Todd's position.
The
right?
position is posted with the larger salary range. Now, between the salary savings we'll get from the loss of Todd, and by the time we hire the other individual person, it'll probably be first of the year. The idea was to have this approved, and so that way we can incorporate it in the budget for 2025.
Nancy?
So you kind of touched on my question under the code enforcement. Because if you're saying we'd have to then look the way you're presenting it for a part-time code enforcement, then we're not just adding a classification increase, we're talking about another position increase, even if it's part-time, so it's kind of like a double hit on the budget in a way.
I wouldn't necessarily, I don't think I'm tracking with what you're saying. Well, what I was trying to explain was we have a code enforcement planner that we have right now. That's Todd. I feel that with the tight labor market, it's going to be very difficult to attract a replacement without increasing the salary range. And so that's what I'm requesting for this particular position, so that way I can post it and then have it incorporated in the budget for 2025. Todd was making 69,000, I believe, in 2025. That would have been assuming the proposed salary adjustments went through. You know, if we were to hire someone and they were qualified, they could go as high as 73 to be at the midpoint of this new price range. So when you talk about impact on the budget, it would be about a $4,000 impact on the budget.
Right, but I was referencing where you said the ultimate goal and also increasing this classification was to have them doing more planning work, and the code enforcement would more likely need to be dropped to being a part-time position for code enforcement alone. So I'm just saying, if we increase the classification level as requested, understanding that that intent is that that will become more planning, less code enforcement. And if you want that part-time, we have to calculate in our heads that at some point, then within the next, say, 6 or 8 months, you could be coming back saying, well, now we need a code enforcement person. That's all.
Yeah, I would be confident telling you that I would not be looking for that part-time code enforcement position. Ideally, would it be great? Yes, but I think that the planner, zoning administrator could take on both the enforcement role as well as the planning role. I have, I as well do the planning and the village board. So it wouldn't be imminent in the next year for that part-time person. I think that down the road, as we become larger and we have more issues with our, business community or residents, as we become more proactive in our enforcement, then we would need to have that part-time person. But at this point, for the next few years, it would just be that one position.
How long has Todd's position been posted?
Yes, it was posted on Friday. And I think the top of the range still fits within, I think, the top of the 12 range. So the midpoint would be, if we increase it to the two groups, the midpoint is at the range that we have, that we'd say we'd hire at the highest point for introductory, and it would give room for growth for that position down the road. If we leave it right now, we'd almost have to pay at the top of the scale. And that's not a practice that we do. And I think that if we had a 55 to 65,000 price range, we're going to get no candidates. And that was a concern the first time we went around, and we were surprised that we got 2. And out of the 2, 1 was actually viable, and it turned out he had circumstances that were very unique, that why he was willing to take that salary. And so I don't think we're going to necessarily get a candidate if we keep the salary range in its current group 12. It needs to move up to group 14 in order to get a candidate that will have the skill set and the experience to get moving right away without having to train them from square one.
I'll make a motion to move it on to the full board, to move this up to the,
To approve and move to the village board?
to approve and move it from the 14 to the 16.
12 to
Or from
14.
12 to 14.
12 to
sorry.
14.
60.
Sorry, I was giving you a really big raise.
12 to 14.
12 to 14.
And move to the village board.
And move it to the village board.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Holly. Motion carries. Okay, suggested items to be placed on the next meeting agenda. I think we have a couple already that we generated tonight.
I have one.
Go ahead.
We received a lengthy email from a citizen. I don't know if any of the admins got it, but about between the 4300 and the 4400 block of 4 Mile, the concerns regarding the condition of the roadway and the speed. Did you guys get it from that gal?
Tony has it.
You guys have it?
I
Okay.
forwarded it to Tony.
If we could just maybe bring it up. She mentioned with large cracks in the roads and things like that. I didn't get a chance to go out there, but maybe just an overall condition of the road check, and we'll look into it. I'll let her
Alright.
know. We'll have it on the next board. And speed.
Next committee of the whole.
What? Next committee of the whole. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And anything else that we'd like to add? Brandon, did you have something to
I
add?
was going to say, including in that or add to that, because I think it tends to be quarry truck traffic. We've had it come up before when the quarry says they can't control it because it's not their trucks, but it's an issue, and I think it does impact the weight of trucks on 4 Mile Road. I'm not sure whether we have trucks exceeding the weight limit of 4 Mile.
Do we have weight limits on that part of the road?
Yes,
Yeah. 'Cause she does mention that they're on that road a
they
lot.
were discussing it.
Yeah.
So any other things to be put on the meeting agenda? Nancy?
Well, if we look at our list of things that we're following, it may not be ready yet, but we have that merchant licensing matter that's needs to come back when it's ready. I don't know if Jen can tell us if it's going to be ready to come up or not.
Again?
Okay. I actually just got the draft back today from Attorney Tim. I don't know his last name. Attorney Tim, yeah. So I just kind of briefly glanced at it, but we'll go over it internally. So it looks like we're going to be doing a complete repeal and replace of the ordinance. So it should be ready for next committee of the whole. Yep.
Anything else for the next committee of the whole? Okay, moving on to budget review, review of 2024 proposed village budget. Wayne, I know we've made some changes. I'm sure you got something to tell us. Killing more paper.
All right, before we get started with the document that Wayne just handed out, we just wanted to make sure that if you had any questions from last night or anything that needed to be revisited, we want to make sure that we gave you an opportunity to ask those questions, to get you those answers, or to revisit any discussions that you may need to from yesterday.
No, seeing none, we'll move forward. So last night we talked about some of the additional revenues in the health insurance savings. So what we are proposing is to make the following changes with those two items. The total between the two is $562,833. We grouped them in a couple different buckets. First, related to personnel costs. We propose to increase the HRA contribution for 2025. For single, it would move from $2,000 to $2,500. For family, from a $4,000 contribution to a $5,000 contribution. These are contribution levels set each year. So if in the future we cannot afford $5,000 for a family, we can always decrease it in the future. The tuition assistance for the paramedic certification was discussed, I believe, the last board meeting, adding $7,500 into the budget for that. The proposed executive compensation adjustments, which you discussed earlier today. The proposed trustee compensation adjustments, that $6,000 does increase to roughly $8,700. The salaries that you were looking at is a little bit higher than what I had on my sheet. We are also proposing the 2025 compensation study. This would be if the village is interested in commissioning our own study. The Village of Mount Pleasant study did go to their board last night, so I would anticipate that it would be available to be shared with us in the very near future. Also, the last item there is transfer of funds in the fire department uniform budget to move that from a contracted service to a clothing expense. This is just a increase in one expense, decreasing another expense. So there really is no impact there, but I'd be looking to make that change in the budget. The fire department is looking to move from a service supply company like Aramark Uniforms to a quartermaster's situation where each employee would get a certain dollar amount to spend on uniforms each year, and then they could go out and purchase their uniforms through a specific site. Because right now, according to the fire chief, the women are not using the uniforms that are provided to them because they don't fit right. Also, there's just styles, and so now people would have certain items that they could purchase. Yes, so it's really, it's a budget neutral change moving forward. So the total of the proposed personnel expenditures, $170,000 on this sheet. Also, some additional operating expenditures. We got the amount back from the city of Racine for the bus service contract for 2025, which is an additional $5,000 from what we're paying this year. There's a increase in the Humane Society contract for 2025 of $2,880. Also, as part of the new building, we had just settled or gotten quotes together from a number of rug providers, and this would put rugs in the new building for $4,500. We want to get those put in as soon as possible before we get to the winter, of course, to keep the building looking nice. Also, an increase in fire work supplies for turnout gear. When we had done the budget earlier, we had lowered the amount by $2,000, and we did not intend to. I don't know. It was just an oversight on our parts. So there's $14,380 in additional operating expenditures. And then the last kind of bucket is capital and other equipment purchases. The village clerk is looking to add an ice machine for elections, not for drinks, for the central count. A tabulator. Jen can explain what we want to do. It's moving to central count, which is a little different way of counting ballots at the in operations, and she could explain that if you have a question.
I can just give you a general overview. Okay, so a central count is just where you're going to count your absentee ballots in a central location. So how we do it now is each polling location counts their own absentee ballots. So that means I have to deliver them there on election day. I also have to make another delivery for anything that came in since the day before. And then at the end of the night, I also make another delivery of whatever came in here. I accept them up until 5 p.m. So that's a lot of having to run around transporting securely ballots to 5 different places. But it also puts a lot of extra work on the polling places. So when they're really busy with in-person voters, then they also have to count all their absentee ballots. I have previously worked places where we had them at a regular, where we counted them at a polling place and then moved to central count. And I can't even tell you the night and day difference of how much easier and smoother the process goes when you have a central count. So I'm looking to get additional equipment for that. So I would need 1 tabulator and another set of Badger books. The Badger books are already factored